Now recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Murphy, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just would like to refresh the memory that we were not really allowed to pick our own individuals on that committee, and they were just picked essentially because they didn't like Trump. But that's a secondary issue. I wish Mr. Irving and Mr. Stenger were here today to defend themselves, because from what I'm reading, there's absolutely no defense of themselves. I'm just going through this. So let me go through a little bit. There's a lot of conjecture as to the presence of law enforcement on January 6th. Questions about law enforcement being embedded, plainclothes officers. In my questions to the current Capitol Police Manager, Manger, he was unable to speak about how many plainclothes individuals are there. Chief Son, while you were Chief of Police, was there a process in place if a federal agency were there in plainclothes or undercover agents?
For coming up on the Hill, sir?
Yeah, on Capitol grounds.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thinking back, do you know if there were any federal officers authorized by the Capitol Police to be operating on the Capitol grounds?
Other than Capitol Police, not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay.
Now, real quick, we did have Secret Service up there with Vice President Pence, and they are also not in uniform.
Absolutely. Do you know if the FBI or Department of Homeland Security had any plainclothes employees in the crowd on January 6th?
Only what I'm learning, from GAO report that came out just in.
Are you aware of any individuals in the federal government that were wearing bracelets so they could be identified?
Not that I'm personally aware of now.
Okay. Prior to January 6th, do you ever recall an instance in which plainclothes or undercover agents came onto the Capitol grounds without the Chief of Police approval?
No, sir. Not that I recall.
All right, thank you. It's very, very disheartening to read this narrative of when you asked for help, and the 2 days before they didn't care about doing something because it may have looked bad. When therefore, none of us in this room are saying what happened on January 6th was correct. But I absolutely believe the conditions for that to occur rest at the former Speaker's lap and the two sergeant-at-arms and complicit with other individuals. It's one thing for something to occur, but it's another thing to create the conditions for that to occur. Let me ask you this. I'm reading here, Mr. Irving only provided security information to Republicans after receiving distinct instructions from Democratic leadership. On January 4th, he sent a text to Fleet asking him to, quote, act surprised when Irving emailed him and his Republican counterpart information about the joint session. Is there anything wrong with that?
Just want to make sure I understand.
So Irving basically asked Fleet to act surprised about the information when he was sending it to the Republican. In other words, he knew the information before, but he was withholding it from the minority party.
That's one of the big problems you have with the Capitol Police Board and the Sergeant Arms. They're too politicized.
Well, did you resign because you wanted to?
No, I didn't. I love the Capitol Police. I love the men and women.
I personally believe you were a scapegoat. You were a scapegoat of conditions that were set forth where you could not succeed. What happened on January 6th was unforgivable, but the conditions were set forth by the former Speaker and two sergeant-at-arms for the conditions for that to occur. Absolutely. I don't care if the National Guard were out there. I don't care about optics. I care about safety. Absolutely. And it's a dereliction of duty of the former Speaker, her staff, and the two sergeant-at-arms. Let me ask one more line of questioning. Pipe bombs. The day before January 6th, live pipe bombs were planted outside the Republican and Democrat Party headquarters. The U.S. Capitol Police has not received any insight into the FBI investigation, which is astonishing because members of Congress on both sides may very well have been targeted by these bombs. During a hearing this summer, the U.S. Capitol Police Board, I called on the board to request a briefing from the FBI to the status of this investigation. The board committed to do so. Mr. Chairman, I submit this letter to the record verifying the request. Chief Son, before you resign, can you recall anything about the pipe bomb incident?
Other than the time they were called out, us sending resources over to them and hearing both the RNC and the DNC. First one went out the RNC, and I was worried that could be a distracting for us. And then the second one came out, and that raised a lot of concerns.
To your initial comments originally, here we are several years out. Do you think it's acceptable that the FBI still cannot identify the individual placing the pipe bombs?
I find it very, very surprising, knowing the security level that we have down here, the amount of resources that can be available for an investigation. I'm surprised that we haven't.
I find it absolutely surprising. Same thing with a bag of cocaine in the White House that probably had fingerprints and every camera known to God in that building. And so, again, I'll say what happened on January 6th was absolutely wrong. But the conditions set forth by the Speaker, her administration, and the 2 sergeant-at-arms and whoever was complicit with that absolutely allowed you to fail, and then members of Congress to be at risk of being injured. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.